All right. So it looks like everybody's kind of popping on here. Um, we are so excited. I have been literally waiting for this one pretty much since November because those of you guys that know me well, know that I spend a good amount of my life on the road at events, speaking to different people, hearing different speakers speak. And I can vividly remember when I heard Phil speak on stage. And at the top of my notes, I tried to find that piece of paper, but I've actually implemented most of what he's talked about. But at the top of that piece of paper, I wrote, Alyssa, you have to book Phil for the MCC. So welcome to January's installment of the MCC Live. We're so glad to have you guys. Phil is an absolute sales expert. He has written 3 books. And what I find particularly remarkable about Phil is he can truly teach you exactly what to say. I think so many of us struggle with, what do I say in sales? How do I connect with people personally and come off approachable, but still get the results that we want? So I am not going to do a poor job of introducing Phil. I'm going to let Phil take it away and introduce himself. So welcome, Phil.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show. Thanks for everybody else listening in right now. It's always a joy. And I guess our time together today is about looking at what we can do to help the other people, the other side of these cameras, here to get more confident in their conversation, make more of those conversations count, and help them get more of their own way more often.
Absolutely. And just so that you guys know, feel free to drop questions as Phil and I are chatting. Feel free to drop questions in the chat or the Q&A box, and I'll make sure that Phil gets them asked. So, Phil, tell me this. You go to your website, and the first thing it says, and it captures it so well, you kind of live by this philosophy of change your words, you can change your world. And I absolutely love that because I think it's so true. So why do you believe that what we say has this immense power to dictate kind of the course of events that happen?
Great question. I think flip it from the other side. How many times have you stepped away from a conversation feeling remarkably hurt or upset by something somebody said? How many times?
Quite a few, yeah.
Thinking, I wish I said something different. How many times has your point of view been misinterpreted from saying the wrong thing in the wrong way at the wrong time? So we all have enough evidence to back up that we can sabotage a conversation or sabotage an outcome from messing it up with word choices. So the reverse of which would obviously be true is that we can create a fair advantage in the right direction if we can find the right words at the right time. Too many people in business focus everything on like lead flow, opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. And they spend a fortune on it, whether it's in money or energy, find themselves toe to toe with an opportunity and then burn straight through that by not having the right words at the right time. And what I've learned through, well, now training over 2 million sales professionals and having been involved in a few $1 billion worth of transactions myself, that it's that point of contact where deals are won or lost. And if you view the conversation as a machine and you look at all those little cogs, it's the conversational cogs that we have the most friction, the most drop off, the most loss of momentum. So I've studied that. I study word choices, study the impact that words have on conversation, and I found out that they are probably the things that grease the machine better than anything else.
Absolutely. No, I think it's so impactful. Listening to you speak back in October at the Curator event, that's immediately what I thought to myself of, well, not only does he have this amazingly charming British accent that probably helps your word choices, but it also, the words that you were saying to deliver your message made such an impact. And that was actually the conversation that I had over lunch after we heard you speak of, had he chosen different words, I don't think his message would have been received the way it was, which is, I realize, by design. So let me ask you this, because I think sales sort of gets a bad reputation. It kind of gets misinterpreted. And what I love about your philosophy is you acknowledge sales is a results-driven business. We're all in business. We're making money, but why you really have made this your life's work, kind of your passion project, is because you don't want the consumer or the individual to get lost in that. And so often the individual does. But to me, and this is why I agree with you, sales to me has always been delivering on what someone indicated that they wanted in the first place. It's delivering on being able to help somebody. So do you see sales people, whether it's real estate or something else, do you see as truly as like problem solvers? How do you view sales individuals?
Okay. There's a few things that we are as salespeople. And I think the first thing we have to do is we have to address, again, the negative side of what people think about salespeople. If I stand at a conference and I ask people to throw adjectives at me about what a stereotypical salesperson is, I receive back a list of adjectives that you probably wouldn't wish upon your worst enemy. So what happens there is we have an image, or we conjure up a belief of what a salesperson is something that nobody wants to be. I asked that same group of people not to describe a stereotypical salesperson, but to describe a professional salesperson by alternative. And they reach for a completely different set of adjectives. They reach for things like helpful, caring, honest, trustworthy, problem solving, helpful. They reach for words that you would love to be used to be able to describe you. So to everybody listening in right now, is I do promise you this: if anybody ever says the words to you that you are a great salesperson, it's not in fact a compliment. It means it's caught, right? Caught trying to sell something to somebody. Our goal is different. What we should be looking to be as to be sales professionals is to understand that the finish line that we have in our mind isn't the transaction itself. The finish line that we have in our mind isn't the signing of the contract. It isn't the receipt of the commission check. It isn't the point where most people in the real estate industry are high-fiving and whooping and hollering. It's actually the point in time that is 6 months down the track after they've closed on the deal, where they're sat in there and you go, you know what, we're glad we did this. We're glad we stretched. We're glad we listened to her. We're glad we moved in and looked at that alternative area. We made the right decision, and it was because. So it's not selling ice to polar bears anymore. It's putting ourselves in a situation where the other person is grateful for our assistance later down the track, which leads me to probably 2 big points. What a salesperson is, in my mind, is firstly is a decision catalyst. We're responsible for helping people to make their mind up. Indecision is the enemy. And we know the majority of people that we bump into, the reason they don't do something isn't because they choose to not do it. It's because they stay in the position of maybe. Do we list? Don't we list? If we list, do we list for what price? Do we get that one on that street, or do we push towards that one? Do we up our budget? Do we negotiate our terms? Do we consider that offer because they're going to close there quicker than that one? Do we price at this point hoping to get, a bidding war on it? Like all of these decisions that are involved that people are fundamentally unqualified to make, we are involved to help them make those decisions, not make them for them, but help ask the questions of them. So what they can do is make informed, smarter decisions, knowing there's no right or no wrong. There's just consequences and benefits attached to each of those decisions. The decision catalyst is one. Perhaps could even be described as a professional mind maker-upper. That's what our job is. And if not that, what we need to understand is what selling is earning the right to make a recommendation. So that means that we're not pushing anything on anybody. We're not embellishing a product or service with features and benefits. We're earning the right to make a recommendation, which means we should never, ever, 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 ever invite somebody to do something unless we can say these words first. And the words we should look to be able to say first are the words because of the fact that you said. So we should be able to say, because of the fact that you said X, Y, and Z, is for those reasons what I'm recommending is A, B, and C. So because of the fact that you said you'd like to be moved in time for the new school term starting, for those reasons, what I recommend is that we price aggressively, we get maximum energy involved, and what we do is that we run an open house next weekend, right? For those reasons. Hey, because of the fact that you said it's important for you to let this one go and allow your life to be able to move on, what you might be looking to do is to accept this offer that is less than what you thought, to give you the freedom to be able to move on and do blank, blank, and blank. So using other words back against them to help create their reasons, which means we have to have done the work first to be able to have got the data that sits in the because of the fact that you said blank and blank and blank part.
Yeah, and so you hit on something important, because in real estate and in so many versions of sales, we kind of want to be one and done. We want to answer the lead call, have the conversation, and close them all on the phone in those first 5 minutes. Right. And what you hit on is that's not the process you should be following. You should be using that call, using that time to gather information, to have a real conversation so that you can lean on because you said, and lean on all of those things in that relationship. The other thing that I love that you said, and I'm paraphrasing here, is that the opposite of love isn't exactly hate, it's indifference. And It's so true. I tell so many of our clients, a no is just as good of a yes as a yes, because this is not something that I'm further kind of pursuing. Indifference, that sitting on the fence, that's the difficult time waster. That's not the money-making activity that we want to focus on. So I love the idea of getting them to move the needle one way or the other, based on the data that they're giving you. So you hit on one other thing that I'll go. In real estate, as in so many kind of burgeoned sales industries, there's this ongoing debate about scripts. And your books arguably are books of scripts. I originally kind of struggled with the idea of scripting because it felt very impersonal. I wasn't into the idea of just reading off of a piece of paper kind of thing. My thinking has definitely evolved, where I think scripts can be hugely helpful. So why do you think scripting is so powerful?
Again, let's look to the reasons why people have some challenges with scripts, right? Scripts can sound canned. Scripts can be robotic. People are different. What there are is unique sets of circumstances. Therefore, why should we treat everybody in the same way? You feel like that you are being penned in. You could feel like you don't have the freedom with conversation within scripts. So there's an abundance of reasons why you could easily believe that scripts aren't a bad idea. Let's throw it the other side, though. Have you ever seen a movie and cried?
Absolutely.
It was an actor reading a script. That was the gig, right?
There you go.
Involved in it. Let's have a look at that same actor in another set of circumstances, though. The hardest part of that actor is they had to be somebody else. Who am I asking everybody to be here? Is only be yourself. What made you cry? It wasn't just the great words that were written down in the script that had to be learned. It was the delivery of said scripts. Now, what happened was they crafted those words out perfectly to create a specific universal response. That's what happens when an actor has to deliver that. They have to perform it, but they never read it, did they? They read it the first time they saw it. By the time they got to be able to deliver the scene that you watched in the movie, they performed that script, having to feel like in the moment of the person that they were. Put yourself in the moment of where you need to be, get to perform the script, but not in character as somebody else, in a character as yourself.
Right.
What also then happened, though, for the actor is the second they knew their words and they understood their lines, they could be more present. They could think about feeling an emotion. They could listen and respond to what else might be going on. So people think a script ties you up. It doesn't. It gives you the freedom to be able to react in a multitude of other different directions. Let's also consider this. How unique and different are the sets of circumstances that you find yourself in? Because my experience is
arguably, yeah, pretty similar. If it's most
pretty similar, right? there are more similarities than there are differences. You find yourself saying the same thing over and over again, one way or another. And when is the worst time to think about the thing you're going to say?
When you're about to say it. Can you tell I've read the books?
Right. So that's what happens, though, is that we find ourselves lost for words. We don't want to be canned, etc. But what happens is if you get your words right, ahead of time, you can be more present in the conversation. You can go off script and come back to it should you need to, because what you've done is you've practiced sequences of words. Here is one thing I find myself doing in real estate, is I say to somebody, why should I choose you as opposed to somebody like you? And what I get back is, like, they got nothing. Or they
Which
give
that
me
should be a question that everybody gets. I mean, I would guess, just looking at the audience that's logged on, you guys all probably got that question 5 times today.
Right. So you should be ready with a response to that says, well, this is me, not, well, I've been doing this for 11 years and I grew up locally and we have access to some of the best in technology and all. Like, you can't answer the what makes you different question with the stuff that makes you the same as everyone else and expect it to be able to, like, deliver. You have to be able to build a story around that you feel confident with, where you're like, I'm so glad you asked. And then you can hit with posture, knowing that the right message to the right person is going to resonate in the right kind of way. But you've got to get those words down pat ahead of time, and you've got to be comfortable. Also, think about nearly every objection that you face in the real estate business. Well, there would have been a question you could have asked earlier on that would have prevented that objection being said. Similarly, when that objection comes, if you train yourself right, there's a question that you can deliver upon that puts you back in control of the conversation, helps you steer it towards the fact that your buyer or seller at that moment in time can start to see things through a different lens. But we got to, again, be ready for it. So maybe we could even have some fun with the people listening in right now about what some of those common scenarios are. Like, let's not be hypothetical and go, well, okay, what do we do when we bump into this or when we bump into that? See if we can make something real. So I'm good with comments or questions, or if anybody's got a do for this. Sounds
Please,
like
guys, definitely drop in the Q&A or drop it in the chat. And if you have a scenario that you want Phil to kind of role play out, seems like he's willing to do it, which is, you would be wasting his time if you did not do that, and wasting you being here if you did not utilize Phil in this way. So Phil, you hit on something so interesting, and I love this point of the worst time to think about something is when you're about to say it. And a lot of people will kind of struggle sort of taking this away from real estate of I'm okay in my sales industry, but then I get home and I struggle. And my response to them is always, well, that is much more unscripted, because in a lot of your family relationships, things like that, you're not facing the same objections. You're having to have that conversation. And what you hit on that's so powerful in terms of sales is what this frees you up to do is listen. That's really the hardest part about sales, is not what to say or the speaking part of it. It's the listening to what they're saying back to you. And so what Phil is talking about, you guys, is so powerful, because it allows you to say what you're going to say and then shut up and listen to what they're saying back, so that you can take notes and you can write down questions that you'd like to ask them as follow-ups and follow up on certain points. So that's super powerful. So Phil, while we wait for people to chime in the chat in terms of things that they might want you to work through, you getting a little bit away from what to say. You also wrote a book about exactly where to start. And it may be serendipitous that we have you on as our January guest, because everybody's kind of set out with their New Year's resolution. They've got some audacious goals, and many people kind of fail before they ever get started because they lack this clarity on where to start. So given that you've written a whole book on it, what's some helpful advice for where people should start on a lot of these big goals that they're taking on this year?
Okay. Well, help me understand maybe an example of what a big goal might be, something relevant.
Sure.
Something real.
Sure. So say somebody, well, I see Jay Marks is on. He's a really good example. He does a food series blog. If you guys didn't see it, you should pop over on my page, and we featured him last week. But say somebody in real estate wants to start a video series this year, and they're kind of struggling with, I don't even know what to do first. Where would they start?
Well, I'm going to pick up my own book here and point to the chapter list that is 10 steps long. And this walks people through exactly where to start. So let's hit it kind of high level right now. Is the first thing to do is to create some form of personal social accountability, even in your own mind, of this is something I'm going to do and this is when I'm going to have it done by. Creating that deadline and giving yourself a fine reputation to live up to. Next thing we might want to do is just stop waiting for permission. I think way too many people put themselves in a situation where it's like, okay, I need somebody else to tell me to go. I need a client to ask me. I need an employer to give me the opportunity. I need my parents to say it's okay. I need 3 other people to want to do it with me. I don't know what it is, but I need somebody else to give me permission. So what I do to try and help people with that is to do things like remind yourself that you are actually a proven success story. Is if you go back to the very first moment that you started in life and think about the first thing you did that you succeeded at, even if it was tying your shoelaces or swimming 10 meters, and then you write down every accomplishment from that point, you're going to prove to yourself that you actually succeeded at far more than you failed at. And I think getting in that frame of mind that says, actually, I'm not the failure that I've been telling myself I am today. I'm not the procrastinator that perhaps I've convinced myself I am. If I look through my elongated journey of things that I've done, I've actually done a ton of stuff. From there, what you want to do is start to think around how your own mind works. So you've got to look at the thing that you want to be able to achieve and make it real. You've got to say, well, actually, what could it do if it goes awesome? What could it do if like it just goes okay? And what's the worst that happens? Like say, for example, that you wanted to start this big content library. What's the worst that happens? Well, the worst that might happen is, well, you crystallize your thinking to a point that help you more within your day-to-day life. Well, what do I really want to do?
You hit on such an important point though there, Phil, because we all often say, you know, what if I fail? What if I don't succeed at this? But you also pointed out that you should ask what would be the great success. So kind of flipping the script, if you create this great video library, what if you gained all of these prospects from that? And I think that success gets hard to see because we focus on what could go wrong instead of what's going right.
A simple takeaway is in every action that you take, you should give yourself maybe at least 3 levels of success. And first level of success is what's the worst that could happen? Like what is worst case scenario? Second is, what am I really doing it for? What do I hope is going to happen? And then the third thing is if today was my birthday and this went like gangbuster in a way that I couldn't comprehend, how good could that be? And now we've thrown away the idea of right and wrong. Like you should do the same in your real estate appointments. When you turn up for a listing, like what's the worst that happens out of this conversation? What am I really here to be able to do? And if today was my birthday, what happens? Well, like worst case scenarios, I show up, I give a good representation of myself and my company. I help them understand the kind of service that we do. I let them know what our pricing would be, and I help them understand the process. But what am I really here for? I'm really here to be able to secure the listing today and make sure that what we do is we nudge out any of the other competition and do so at a good price. Yeah, but if today was my birthday, what could that be? Well, I could get 3 referrals into their friends. I could also find out that what they have is they have a portfolio of dozens of other properties around town. And what I could do is I could be their agent of choice. And now that we're going into every one of these opportunities thinking differently. The next big step for an idea, though, the one that almost everybody misses out on, is you have to make it work on paper. You have to take the time and say, what does this really look like? Like, could you imagine opening a box of IKEA furniture with no instructions? You'd be like, I know this does make a dresser. I'm pretty sure that it does, but where do I start? What do I do? So you have to almost reverse engineer your plan to what you want to do. So you might go, well, I want to do this video series. Well, what equipment do I need? When am I going to record? How long is it going to take to record? Who's going to edit? Boom, boom, boom. Like all the little decisions that be able to go into it. And now you've made a plan that you look at and you go, well, I've got the time, I've got the money, I've got the tools, I know where it's all going to fit. You might have to change some pieces as you go through that plan. Then you look at it and go, I just wrote the IKEA flat pack furniture list for my big idea. Then you realize you know what step 1 is. And there's loads more that you can do in and around launching it, but it starts by having some belief in yourself, planning out some levels of success, getting it working on paper, and just understanding that you probably can do a lot more than you thought you could.
Yeah, I love that you kind of distill things down to these small steps, because oftentimes, I mean, just like you say, if you open up a box of, you know, if it's IKEA, there's bound to be at least 5,000 pieces. But I mean, you know, there's 5,000 pieces in any IKEA box, and it's super daunting. But if it's all pretty much put together and one of the doors is missing, you can probably figure it out. And so some of these, like, looking at 5,000 pieces versus looking at, okay, I know how to attach this door and these are the screws, that's different. And so distilling it down to these small, tangible steps does a lot for you, both kind of being able to accomplish it, but also kind of building into your mindset, right?
And add to that, everybody was an amateur before they were a professional at anything. And it's giving yourself that freedom to be able to grow. We live in a world today where we can find examples of perfection and abundance, but you don't see the examples of mediocrity that are layers beneath that would have happened for everybody who got to that level of perfection. So this permission to fail, this permission to be able to have a go becomes remarkably important, and I think is forgotten. People often ask me, like, how do you get to be so good at something? And it's because I've been doing it for a ton of time. I messed it up a ton of times. I felt the pain of regret of going, I should have done it a different way. And then I've gathered that lesson through experience. And I think if there's something you want to do that you have a big goal for, give yourself permission to fail at it, give yourself permission to learn at it, and then accelerate that decision making towards it. That means that you might wake up a year on from now, not with the perfect picture of the thing that you hoped, but a hell of a lot closer to it than you are trying to perfect it in your time.
Absolutely. No, you make such a good point. So besides for what to say, or besides for where to start, I'm a big believer that one of the things a lot of people in sales actually struggle with is not, and I believe scripts actually help with this, is not just what to say or where to start or how to say certain things. It's the confidence with which they say it, which kind of goes back to your point of you will not look confident when you are trying to think about the next thing to say as you're supposed to be saying something else. So how can somebody on here that's maybe newer build into their confidence in terms of how to practice these things, what to say, what to do? What do you use to build your confidence?
Before you can have confidence, you must have experience. Because confidence is having the certainty that you know how something is going to work out after the fact before you do it. That's what confidence is. Which means that you have to have done that thing a number of times to have that level of self-belief. If you have that level of self-belief before you have the experience, it isn't confidence you have, it's arrogance.
Right.
So you can't fake confidence. What you can do is you can gather experience and you can grow from that experience. So that would be my thing to chase on that. I think though in a sales world there's a phrase that I use quite often, which is if you're not convinced, you cannot convince. So if you do not believe with absolute certainty that what you have to offer somebody is worth what you're asking and some, don't ever expect them to be able to believe it. A place that you can grow in posture from, and I'll swap the word posture with confidence in this circumstance on purpose, is by do the time, effort, and energy to make sure that you believe with great conviction that you're worth the money. This might mean competitive shop. This might mean take the time to be able to articulate all the things you do for the money in which you're asking. This might be itemize out and break down to a piecemeal fashion that if your service was a shopping list, how much would each one of those services be? Put yourself in a position that you can believe that you're absolutely worth it. And then you have to care with great passion about the outcome that you're looking to be able to go and achieve for the other person.
Yeah.
This is back to the point you made at the beginning about being a problem solver. But you have to be clear on what the problem is that you're looking to be able to solve, which I think that many make is they think they're a problem solver, but they're trying to solve a different problem to the problem that's really true. The example that I might use here right now is if you think about the wedding dress business. If you're in the wedding dress business and you run a shop that sells wedding dresses, many people may celebrate the day the bride chooses the dress. She's chose the dress, everything's awesome, aren't we fabulous? We helped to choose a perfect dress. That's the wrong problem to be focused on being able to solve if you want to be sustainable. The real problem to be able to solve there is what many businesses have wrapped their head around. Is it's not how well did the dress look in the bridal store on the day that she tried it on, surrounded by friends with a glass of champagne in her hand and everybody around it. The dress had to perform and look magnificent on a different day other than that, which was what day?
The wedding day.
Still wrong. That's not the day.
The day she gets her photographs? I don't know. I just got married.
That's it.
Okay.
It's the photo day.
It's going to be one of the three.
It's the photo day, right? The photo day is the day that is most important in the world if you want to be really tuned in. So if what you can do is understand in that business that your job is fixing the problem of making sure she loves the way she looks in her photos, then what you'll do is you'll solve a long-term problem. Yeah. Yes, counting back from that, every experience leading up to it needs to go well. It needs to go well on the day that she tries it on the first time. It needs to go well through all the fittings. It needs to perform well on the day itself through the ceremony, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? You could mess up on some of those other points.
Absolutely.
As long as it looks great in the photos.
Yep.
If it looks shoddy in the photos and every other point goes perfect, the dress was a failure. The experience was a failure. The encounter with that individual was a failure. Somebody gets the blame. So I think this is what becomes crystal clear, is what problem is it that we solve. And in the world of real estate, with compromise being so important and nothing actually being perfect, finding clarity on what the most important thing is that the other person is looking to try and achieve from the sale, from the move, etc., can actually make a great deal of difference. Because they might say, I want 3 bedrooms, bathroom, whereas what you really find out they need is low taxes,
Right,
low holding costs. That's something completely different. Or what you might really find is they need to be the right side of a zip code for order to be able to get into somewhere. Like there might be something else that is more important than the thing that they're really telling you. And get to that point, and the point they're going to be proud of making a decision on 6 months down the track, the nuances on money that stand in the way of transactions at the front end long get forgotten.
yeah. No, I mean, that is a perfect analogy, because it's interesting. I think most people would say the wedding day, which in real estate is arguably the closing day. And everybody's happy on the wedding day. Like literally, I just got married in June, and honestly, I hated my dress on the day because it was so hot. And I took that thing off as soon as I could. But I love it in the pictures. So you're so right. It really does make a difference. And that's why that was my second guess. But extrapolating that out and saying, okay, in real estate, what does that look like? That means that the most important problem to solve is how it feels to live in that house every day. It's not the selecting the house. It's not the what happens from contract to close. It's, do you understand how they live their life and how they're going to live in that home? And that's a huge aha moment for, I would say, 90% of people in real estate sales.
Take real estate there as well is you've got how they feel in the home emotionally. You've got how it functions in terms of a logical experience point. You've got what the physical time, effort, and energy it takes from an upkeep and a maintenance point of view. You've got does it have the ability to do the all and what else things that you love to do, whether it's hobby, whether it's entertaining, whether it's guests staying in another direction. You've got the physical holding costs of taxes, running costs, etc., that could be different. Like you could get somebody to the perfect home, but if it costs them twice as much as they would like it to in order to be able to stay in there, and they let go of an income in 5 years' time, you've actually planted a time bomb there that they didn't think about. If you can think about these things for them, you can help them make smarter decisions where they wake up 12 months down the track and say, I'm so glad I met you.
Right. And there's this in real estate, I've always thought it was an incredibly offensive statement, but there's this statement in real estate of buyers are liars. And I've always believed that it's not that, it's that they don't always know. So to use myself as an example, when I moved into the house that we live in now, I didn't really want to move here. I wasn't super excited about moving, but I understood, I think it'll make our lives better. We'll be closer to the kids' school. There's lots of neighbors that go to school with them. We're closer to activities. But I didn't know how extremely important that was to me until I lived in the house. And so I couldn't even articulate that to someone who asked me that question in advance. And so I think what you're saying is so incredibly important of, you have to not only listen to what they're telling you, you have to kind of branch off of that and ask more questions to try and uncover some things that they may not even know.
Well, here is lifting some tools from exactly what to say, where we can have some fun for people. Is we have to come at things 2 ways around. Firstly, be prepared to ask people what they don't want.
Yeah.
What are the things that you definitely don't want? And then what we have to have is the ability to move people through time in either their mind or in their heart. Mm-hmm. And there are 2 sequences of words that we can lift from the book there that allow us to be able to move people through time in either mind or heart. We can move people in time with their mind utilizing the words just imagine. So just imagine 8 months on from now that here we are stepping into the fall and the leaves are falling off the trees, and what you've got is this beautiful outlook where you can see across from here, plus you've got all the leaves on the lawn. What are you going to want to do? Mm-hmm. Right, is the view more important than the ability to be able to make? Like we can get into a conversation about it by moving through time. So we can use just imagine to get people to think about their life in the future, both with good news or bad news, to get them to be able to consider the distance between those 2 things. Mm-hmm. And that's how you move people with their mind. How you move people with their heart is utilizing the words, how would you feel if, which is a future conditional scenario setter, right? So how would you feel if 6 months on from now, that what you had is that you were out of that property, you're in here, that your overhead on a monthly basis was significantly lower, and you had the freedom to spend more time on the golf course? How would you feel if that were true?
Always a good thing.
Right. Or how would you feel if what happened is that you didn't make this move on this house right now, you didn't increase your offer, and what happened was is somebody else was living in it and you had to drive past it every day? How would you feel if that was true? Right. So we could plant these thoughts in people's minds to get them to make movement on today's decisions, allowing them to be able to see or feel things in the future.
Well, and one of the things that you do that I think is so different and why you really appealed to me is so many sales trainers will say, you have to keep them in a positive mindset. You have to get them to say yes a certain amount of times, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. But just like we were saying at the beginning, it's just as powerful for them to say, I'd be okay with that if I missed out in 6 months. Like, I feel okay about that. You are learning about what matters to them. Two of the
what every audience is looking for in today's market, and particularly understand that today's market is different to what a market was 10 years ago. Buyer has way more transparency. They have different motivational factors than what they had before. They have more buying power than they've ever had at any point in transactional history. What every audience is looking for is show me that you know me. That's what they're looking for. And you talked about our speech that I delivered at Curator. I think one of the reasons that speech was so well received is everybody in the audience could look at it and go, this guy gets the problems and challenges that we're faced with on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. That's what your customer is looking for in you, is looking at, oh, she or he gets what it's like to be me. They can see the world through my eyes. They can help me overcome some of the obstacles that I am aware of and some of the ones that I might not be. That's Absolutely. The goal to get to. Which means You've got to be prepared to move out of the Lego movie theme tune of everything is awesome. Mm-hmm. And look at both sides of a coin. Even more so, I think, in a real estate transaction where perfection isn't an option.
Right.
It doesn't exist. Even buying a plot of land and building your dream home is not the perfect solution for anybody, because there's hoops that are going to suck. Right. You have to look at all of it. And I think that level of transparency and honesty with optimism attached that says we're going to get there or somewhere near close is how you can win in a market when everybody else wants to pick your pocket.
Absolutely. I think, Phil, it's so powerful to me to hear you speak, because I think not only do you really get it, but the words that you share, you guys, if you don't have this book, you should buy it. And it's not just because I have Phil on the show. It's because these small tweaks to your language, these small word changes really can change your world. I promised Phil that I would end up using this on the show. But when I asked Phil to speak, to book him, I used his own magic on him. And I think that helped me not get rejected, not just because these words work, but I mean, how do you turn down something you taught? And I used 2 of Phil's scripts, and I said, Phil, I'm not sure if this is for you or not. I know you speak on big stages, but I do this monthly coaching club. It's a webinar. And if you're anything like me, another one of his, you travel all the time. But the advantage here is you could take it from anywhere. And Phil shared with me, he said, how do I turn down that offer after that? I mean, I'm sure that you've gotten much better offers than this, but I think what that was so powerful about is it helped you understand that I understand that your time is valuable. I understand that you're moving all the time. I understand that you're traveling all the time, and that when you're home, probably the last thing you want to do is a webinar that isn't going to pay you to do it. But I also understand that this is a passion project of yours, and there's some real value here, and that you're speaking to people who can so much benefit from your life's work. So thank you. So I've got one more question before I let you run, Phil. I see so many people in sales, and I know you see this too. So many people in sales have an awesome conversation just like we did, and then they lose the deal at the close. And to me, closing is so important. You have to be able to say what's next or kind of build out the plan. How can people effectively close deals in their conversations to ensure a higher rate of success?
Okay. The how-to here is not something where there is a one-size-fits-all process. We do have to understand if you don't ask, you don't get. So let's deal with a common mistake. So that often happens is often we deliver all the information and people think that closing is in fact either just like this awkward wait. Sometimes an awkward wait is like backed up in a face-to-face conversation by people gesturing in a very weird way of like nodding or shifting the body towards them in an unusual capacity. But what we really do have to have is we'd have to have an invitation for the other person to take the next step. And I think that's a fun way of looking. It's an invitation to say, here's what next. Now, sometimes you can do that with a direct lead in an assumptive fashion, and that might be utilizing words like what happens next. Right. So what happens from here is that I'm going to prepare this, this, and this, and this. You're going to give me access to this. I'm going to do this. Then this is going to happen. Then that's going to happen. Boom, 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 boom. You make a series of statements in the what happens next thing. And then if you follow up those series of statements with a question, and the question is then answered, it means they must have agreed with the statements. So if you make the final question in that series of statements that fell into your what happens next sequence, the question might be something like, oh, when it comes to getting access for the photographer, are we okay to use the key that's in the lockbox? And they say, yeah, sure. It means they've agreed with your fees, they've agreed with the timing, they've agreed with the listing instructions, they've agreed. The second they say yes to that. So your final question should always be an easy one to answer. It could be as simple as, when it comes to photographing, and we better to call you or your husband. Right? Oh, no, that should come through me. Okay, great. Well, what I'll do is I'll speak to them and I'll give you a buzz back about when we can get that set up. Right? So now we're straightening and we're moving, but we're not saying, is this a yes or is this a no?
And by design here, are you giving them options, or are you saying, like, you're not ever leaving that open-ended, are you? Are you giving them saying you or your husband, or are you saying who should we call?
Right. I'm not saying who should we call. I'm actually giving them two versions of yes.
Right.
What you could also consider here is you could have two levels of service, right? You might have two levels of service for something, and you could say, do you see yourself more here or here? But that's really a pre-close as opposed to a close in its own right. That's saying which one of these is it going to be. If you don't like the idea of leading a conversation, what you might want to do is to make a series of statements and then back it up with a broader, more open question. And a great broader, more open question you could bring towards the end is, help me understand this. What is your decision-making process from here? And I like to be able to do that sometimes. And quite often I do that in my speaking business. So I might have an event manager that has reached out to me, wants me to be able to speak at an event, has selected me as somebody who's been shortlisted, has been in conversation with me to find out things like availability and fees and where I might position a topic that could or couldn't be right. They are like 85% sold, but they can't say yes at this moment in time. They don't hold the checkbook. There's 3 other people in the organization that need to make their mind up. So when I ask the question at the end of the conversation with what's your decision-making process from here, they say, well, I really like what you're about. I think you're going to be a great fit. And they kind of sell me back. I need to speak to so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. We're going to have our decision, the final lineup made up by at this point in time. To which I say, so if I haven't heard back from you by this point, am I okay to reach out and have a further conversation to find out where your head's at? They say, yeah. So I say, great, ball's in your court. If I haven't heard from you by 1st of Feb, I'll drop you a call that day, find out what you want to do next. I say, great. But it's permission-based. So you've got the leadership view, you've got the permission-based to say, look, I understand that there are some obstacles. Now, I might ask the what's your decision-making process from here question of, say, I've had the bulk of the conversation with what I know to be half the decision-maker.
Right.
Because my experience tells me that half a decision-maker can't make a whole decision. Doesn't mean that always when there are multiple parties involved that there are multiple decision makers. Sometimes there is only one decision maker, even though there are multiple parties. But quite often there are multiple decision makers, which is why I asked that, what's your decision making? Well, decision making process is what we decided. Let's do this. Okay, what happens next is.
Yeah.
It's predictable, really.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I think identifying that process and making it all permission based, because I think what makes a lot of us so uncomfortable is this lack of permission that sometimes hard sales techniques teach you of you've got to reach out, you've got to continue that follow-up. Continuing follow-up is so different when somebody said, sure, reach out. Yeah,
Follow-up
exactly.
is best. And too many people drive a process that actually leads to that being the only option. I mean, do you like being followed up? Is that something you like? We live in an environment right now that if you were being followed, you'd probably be calling the cops, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah, we use it in terminology like what we're really saying is I'm going to creep on you until you either make your mind up or hunt me down with a shotgun.
Right.
There's no need for that to be able to happen. Where it happens is when we have a presentation with somebody and then we don't give them all the information and then we try to let email or some form of follow-up communication do our job for us. We send the packet. We know they're not going to read everything that's in the packet. We then chase that piece of information and we make ourselves feel like they are the idiots for not reading it or for not getting back to you.
Yep.
You did all by providing too much information to make a decision.
Yeah, no, you make such a good point because I think that asking those questions, making sure that it's not that creepy follow-up, it's that, hey, I'm just want to make sure that I'm following your process and understanding your process. Not only are you actually conducting better sales in my eyes, you're saving yourself time and money. You're not wasting your time by continuing to follow up. And what you might be doing, which is the idea, is you're prompting action. I'm saying, I don't want you to follow me, Phil. I don't want you to continue to email me. I'm probably going to give you an answer. Right. Or at least tell you when I'll have an answer so that when you keep bothering me, I can give you one. So I think that's super, super powerful. Well, Phil, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know we went a little bit long, but thank you so incredibly much. I think all of you guys can benefit truly from all of Phil's books, but especially Exactly What to Say. It's broken down into a really easy read, and I think there's so many applications, but especially in real estate. Phil, if somebody was looking for you online, where would they find you?
PhilMJones.com will point you just about everywhere that you would need to find me. We have social links on there so you could jump out to your preferred social network. If you want to communicate with me, follow the show, come ping me on Instagram. It's PhilMJonesUK. Instagram and LinkedIn is largely me. Other areas that you might see me showing up online could be some of the team that are producing some of that content. But you're happy to be able to hear from you. My favorite thing to hear from people who've listened to shows like this is tell me what you've done. Tell me what you've implemented. Tell me what you've used. Please don't tell me that anything I said was great unless you went and used it first.
Absolutely. Well, Phil, thank you so much. We'll definitely have you back sometime soon. Those of you guys that will be at Inman, New York next week, or in 2 weeks, excuse me, I will actually be on a panel talking about this individual topic. And it's called To Script or Not Script to Script. So we'll be using tons of takeaways that Phil helped us kind of come across today. And I hope to see you there. If you will be there, drop me a line and we will connect. Maybe I'll even buy you a cocktail. So I hope to see you all soon. Thanks so much for coming. And we'll be back February 4th with Bill Risser, who's going to be sharing with us all about podcasting and how he's gotten his podcast to take off. So Phil, thank you again for joining us, and everybody else, have a great time.